Hi, it's T with TeaQuilts, and I'm here quilting my Kaleidoscope pinwheel quilt that I've made. I made this quilt back in 2001, and I had started hand quilting this motif that you see here. And I originally left my hand quilting in the quilt because I thought maybe I might want to use it just for documentation purposes. When I got to the pinwheels, I had started stitching 1/4 of an inch around those actual triangles by hand, and that was as far as I got. I did maybe 4 blocks with the motifs and about another 4 or 5 blocks where I did the hand quilting 1/4 inch in. I did remove all of the stitching that was in the pinwheel blocks, but I left the hand stitching in the motif blocks. In addition to stitching out the motifs, I then used my Longarm machine to do some stippling in the background. And I'll just show you what this quilt looks like and what I'm actually doing with the Kaleidoscope blocks as I roll down the quilt top here. I'm actually quilting some circles into the Kaleidoscope blocks. I am using actually using 3 rulers to stitch 4 circles, and I'll explain that more when I get to that point. But first, let me just start off with quilting the Kaleidoscope blocks on. So the ruler set that I'm using is a set of rulers called Sweet Set Rules, and I purchased it from nancynotions.com, and it has 6 different rulers inside of this set, and I chose to use 3 of them. So these rulers are made for long arm quilting, and you have to have a base plate put onto your machine in order to stitch with these rulers. And I am first going to line up my north, south, east, and west points with the seam lines. And I did notice that because this quilt had already been pin basted together for hand quilting, that my lines did not match up exact, so I just did the best that I could. So here I'm just pulling up my bobbin thread. And then once I have the bobbin thread up, I try to get the ruler back onto the marks. And when my bobbin thread comes up, it kind of helps me to realign as well, because I know I want my needle to go back into that same point. And then I'm going to hold the ruler so that it doesn't move, but also not so tight that I can't stitch. So I stitch halfway around, then I'll readjust my hands, and then I will stitch the other side. Now when I get back to my start position, you have 2 options. You can overlap and stitch maybe 1/4 of an inch past your starting point to lock your stitches, and or you can use your automatic thread locks on your machine, and or you can back up to do the same thing as if you don't have an automatic thread locking. So now I'm just pulling up my bobbin thread so that I can clip those threads. I try to keep control of the bobbin thread by pulling it up and clipping between each circle so that I don't have all of those threads in the back after quilting that I need to clip. And so now I go and get my second ruler and put it onto the hopper foot and line it up on the lines as well. So this Sweet Set Rule set has quite a few markings that you can use for lining up, so I think they were a very good investment. And I do like that this ruler set allows for you to stitch on the inside or the outside of the ruler, and I found that I like to stitch on the inside of the ruler better. I will say that this whole ruler using experience, it has a huge learning curve. It's very time consuming, and it's not as accurate as it seems just because you're using a ruler. Those rulers will want to move and slide on you. You have to use a lot more pressure on your hand, so if you have carpal tunnel, you know, it could be an issue using the rulers or templates on your Longarm machine. So here I am with circle number 2, got it lined up, got my bobbin thread pulled up. I've done some stitching to get started. I stitch around as far as I can, and then I will readjust my hand just because I don't want that ruler to slip out. And then I keep stitching, and I don't remember if I mentioned that this is not going to be a showstopper quilt. It's not actually going into any show. This is something that I'm trying to use to practice on, and I'm okay with it because it's going to be a utilitarian quilt when I'm done. I'm actually going to put it on my bed, use it and wash it and love it. So now we're on to the 3rd ruler that I'm using, and I'm stitching my 3rd circle. With this ruler, I'm actually going to use it twice. I'm going to stitch on the inside as well as the outside of this particular ruler. So again, I'm pulling up my bobbin thread. And the more that I stitch with these rulers, the better I got. But I wanted to show you at the beginning of my process. I think I had stitched maybe 2 other blocks before I started recording, and I didn't really have the system down pat. But as I got to quilting more and more, it got a little bit easier or more consistent. It still took the same amount of time though. So we're locking these stitches here, and then we're going to use this same ruler now and stitch on the outside. Now stitching on the outside of the circle is a little bit harder than it is to stitch on an inside of the circle. I found that on one side of my ruler, I would be able to stitch close to the ruler and stay hugged up against it. And then when you get to the other side of the ruler, I found that I had a little bit more difficulty staying on the ruler. So as I'm starting here, I do my tacking stitch to hold my thread in place, and then I start stitching around the circle. I stop to readjust my hands, and I think this circle was 6 inches, so it was a little bit wider than, you know, the other rulers that I have been using. And again, I'm walking my way around, and I'm doing pretty good here. I do another little adjustment, and about the next adjustment here, right after that, I get off the ruler, and I about 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch, and so I back up to get back on the ruler, and then I continue on around. So when you're stitching on the outside of the circle, you tend to want to stitch away from the template, so you have to be really careful with that. So now I've stitched all 4 of these circles. We're now going to use Delola's Angle Angel to stitch some radiating lines. At the same time that I'm stitching these radiating lines, I'm also going to be outline stitching around the outside of my pinwheel, and I'm using that for 2 purposes. 1, because I want the pinwheel outlined, and number 2, I can get to my next area without having to break my thread. So here I've got my bobbin thread pulled up, and I'm using the straight edge of the ruler to stitch down to the point. And then when I get to that point, Delola's Angle Angel, the ruler has radiating degree marks that you can use to stitch from one point to another. So on this particular ruler, I'm using the 30-degree line, and I'm going to stitch up that ruler and back down. Where my hand is to the right side, on my seam line right there is where I have my degree marking from the ruler on that seam line. And now I've just turned it so that the 20-degree mark is on that seam line, and I stitch up to the circle, and then I repeat and stitch back. And then my final stitching is at the 10-degree marking, but this time it doesn't reach to the circle. It actually stops at the seam piecing from one triangle to another, and then I back up. Once I've stitched those 3 lines, I then use the edge of the ruler to travel me to my next stitching point. Sometimes I would move that ruler with my stitching. I found that once I got my quarter mark away from the edge, that I just slid the ruler. That was just as easy. So then I continue to do these lines all the way around, and I'm going to speed up the camera after I do this second set. And right there I got off the ruler, so I backed up to start again and go back up the track, so you can see where I got some extra stitching lines. Now the tricky part with the ruler is that it's very difficult to make sure that that ruler does not move, and the farther away you stitch from your pivoting point, the harder it is to come back on a straight line. So it does take some skill building to use this ruler. I found sometimes I was able to come straight back without anything moving, and other times I wasn't. So I just need to do a lot more practice with this ruler. I have used it before, but it was on short blocks, like half square triangle blocks, so it wasn't as long of a travel for me to do. So I do plan to continue to work with this ruler. It is actually one of my favorite rulers. So now I'm just going to speed this up 3 times the speed, just so that you're not sitting here watching the entire thing, because it does take a while to go around each actual block. And I will just go ahead and make this a 2-part video, because this video is already going to be over 15 minutes long. And on the next video I will show you what I did in my borders. So I'll go ahead and say at this time, thank you for watching. If you like this video, please share it with your friends. This video is also a requested video. I've had quite a few of my longarmers wanting me to do more longarm quilting videos. And so I will see you in my next video, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye. you.